Flight details. Narration. This is the fictional story of Flight Meridian 482, operated by the fictional Meridian International Airlines. Aircraft: Boeing 780-79 Dreamliner. Date: October 18. Route: London Heathrow to New York JFK. Distance: nearly 3,500 nautical miles. Weather across the North Atlantic was unusually calm. Clear skies. Gentle jet stream. Almost no turbulence. Inside the cockpit, Captain James Walker, 23 years of airline experience. More than 16,000 flight hours. Beside him, First Officer Elena Ruiz, former military transport pilot. Calm, methodical, highly respected. Cabin crew: 8 flight attendants. Passengers: total souls on board. Nothing suggested this flight would become one of aviation's most unbelievable survival stories. Scene 1: a perfect departure. Narration. Heathrow's morning rush was already underway. Airliners lined up for departure beneath gray autumn skies. Ground crews moved with practiced precision. Fuel trucks disconnected. Cargo doors closed. Passengers found their seats while cabin crew completed final safety checks. Captain Walker smiled as he reviewed the final weather briefing. Everything looked routine. Fuel: excellent. Weather: excellent. Aircraft status: perfect. Sometimes, the most dangerous flights begin exactly like ordinary ones. Pilot dialogue. Captain: flight controls checked. First Officer: checked. Captain: flight management system programmed. First Officer: route verified. Captain: looks like we'll have an easy crossing. First Officer: let's hope it stays that way. ATC dialogue. Heathrow Ground Meridian 482, request pushback. Meridian 482, push approved. Passenger reactions. Families laughed. Business travelers answered emails. Children pressed their faces against the windows. No one imagined the cockpit crew would soon be fighting for their own lives. Technical explanation. Commercial aircraft undergo multiple inspections before every departure. Pilots verify hundreds of items before leaving the gate. The Boeing 787 systems are designed with extensive redundancy to reduce the chance of technical failures. Suspense ending. Everything was exactly as it should be. But sometimes, the greatest threat isn't the airplane. It's the human body. Scene 2: climbing into silence. Narration. Meridian 482 lifted gracefully into the gray London sky. The landing gear folded away. The city disappeared beneath a blanket of clouds. Passengers relaxed. Seatbelt signs switched off. Flight attendants began preparing the first meal service. Inside the cockpit, conversation became quieter. Captain Walker rubbed his forehead. Only once. No one noticed. Pilot dialogue. Captain: passing flight level 280. First Officer: looking good. Captain: just a slight headache. First Officer: need some water. Captain: I'll be fine. ATC dialogue. Meridian 482, climb and maintain flight level 380. Climb flight level 380. Passenger reactions. Most passengers watched movies. Others slept. A little girl colored in an aviation activity book. No one knew the first warning had already appeared. Technical explanation. Cruising altitude around 38,000 feet offers lower fuel consumption and smoother air. The aircraft cabin is pressurized to keep passengers and crew comfortable despite the thin outside atmosphere. Suspense ending. The headache lasted only seconds, but it was the first sign that something invisible had already begun. Scene 3. An invisible enemy. Narration. 30 minutes later, Captain Walker paused in the middle of a checklist. His words slowed. He blinked repeatedly. First Officer Ruiz noticed immediately. Professional pilots are trained to recognize unusual behavior. This wasn't fatigue. Something was wrong. Pilot dialogue. First Officer. Captain. I'm fine. First Officer. You don't look fine. Captain. I'm just. He stopped speaking. ATC dialogue. Meridian 482, report position. Silence. Then. Meridian 482. Passenger reactions. The cabin remained peaceful. Coffee was served. Someone celebrated a birthday. Behind the cockpit door, an emergency was unfolding. Technical explanation. Pilot incapacitation can occur for many reasons, including sudden medical events. Airlines train crews to recognize symptoms quickly so the other pilot can immediately take over flying duties. Suspense ending. The captain leaned forward and never answered another radio call. Scene 4. The second collapse. Narration. First Officer Ruiz immediately grabbed the controls. The aircraft remained stable. She disconnected the captain's microphone, reached for the emergency checklist. Then, she froze. Her own vision blurred. She struggled to focus on the instruments. She reached toward the oxygen mask. Too late. She collapsed across the center console. Now, nobody was flying the airplane. The autopilot continued following the programmed route, but there was no conscious crew left to manage the flight. Pilot dialogue. First Officer. Mayday. Silence. ATC dialogue. Meridian 482, radio check. No response. Passenger reactions. Still, nothing seemed unusual. The airplane continued smoothly through calm skies. Technical explanation. Modern airliners can maintain altitude and heading using the autopilot, but they cannot safely complete an entire flight without crew oversight. Decisions, communications, and landing require human intervention. Suspense ending. 227 people were now depending on a machine. Scene 5. The passenger who couldn't ignore it. Narration. Seat 14A. Daniel Mercer, 46 years old. Quiet. Traveling alone. Most passengers saw only an ordinary businessman. They didn't know he had once been a military flight instructor before leaving aviation years earlier. As the minutes passed, he noticed something unusual. No routine cockpit announcements. No cabin crew communication. Then, a flight attendant quietly knocked on the cockpit door. No answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. Her smile disappeared. Daniel immediately recognized the look in her eyes. Professional concern. Within seconds, the entire flight would change forever. Pilot dialogue. Silence inside the cockpit. Only warning chimes echoed through the flight deck. ATC dialogue. Meridian 482. Contact Shanwick on 127.9. No reply. Controllers exchanged worried glances. Passenger reactions. Passengers began looking up from their screens. Whispers spread across the cabin. What happened? Why isn't anyone answering? Technical explanation. Cabin crew are trained to monitor communication with the cockpit if scheduled check-ins are missed. They follow strict procedures to verify the pilot's condition before escalating the situation. Scene 20. A miracle on the runway. The Boeing 787 burst through the low cloud layer, the runway lights stretching ahead like a lifeline. Every person on board held their breath. Inside the cockpit, warning tones echoed without pause. The passenger at the controls, guided only by air traffic controllers and an experienced airline captain over the radio, made tiny corrections, fighting every instinct to overreact. The aircraft drifted slightly left. Easy, just a little right, the instructor's calm voice came through the headset. The runway rushed closer. Keep the nose steady. 100 feet. 50 feet. Reduce the thrust, now. The main landing gear slammed onto the runway with a violent thud. Smoke exploded from the tires. The aircraft bounced once. For a terrifying moment, it seemed it would become airborne again. But then, the passenger gently lowered the nose. Reverse thrust roared. Auto brakes engaged. The Dreamliner slowed. 100 knots. 70. 40. 20. Finally, the airplane rolled to a complete stop. For 3 long seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then the cabin erupted into applause, tears, prayers, and disbelief. Some passengers hugged complete strangers. Others simply cried in silence, realizing they had just survived what seemed impossible. Outside, fire trucks and emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft within seconds. Paramedics rushed aboard, racing toward the cockpit while firefighters stood ready in case of fire. The 2 pilots were carefully removed and transported immediately to waiting ambulances. Every passenger walked off the aircraft alive. The impossible had happened. Scene 21, the rescue. Emergency medical teams worked tirelessly. The captain regained consciousness hours later in intensive care. The first officer awoke the following morning. Doctors confirmed that both had suffered the effects of an extremely rare and unrelated medical emergency that occurred within minutes of each other. While astonishingly improbable, investigators concluded there was no evidence of sabotage, foul play, or aircraft malfunction. It was a tragic coincidence that nearly became a catastrophe. Both pilots faced months of rehabilitation. Neither blamed the other. Their first question after waking was the same. Did everyone survive? When they learned that every passenger and crew member had made it home safely, both were overcome with emotion. The passenger who had helped in the cockpit never described himself as a hero. During a brief interview, he said only, "I wasn't trying to be brave. I was trying to give everyone another chance to see the people they love." Scene 22, the investigation. For months, investigators examined every detail. The flight data recorder revealed the autopilot had maintained stable flight after the crew became incapacitated, buying precious time for the cabin crew, air traffic controllers, and the passenger to organize a response. The cockpit voice recorder captured calm, disciplined communication under extraordinary pressure. Investigators praised the professionalism of the flight attendants, who quickly recognized that something was wrong and followed emergency procedures without panic. Air traffic controllers were also commended for remaining calm, simplifying instructions, coordinating emergency services, and helping guide the aircraft safely toward landing. The investigation concluded that no single person had saved the flight. It was teamwork. Pilots, cabin crew, controllers, emergency responders, and one passenger willing to step forward when every second mattered. Scene 23, Aviation Lessons. Every aviation incident leaves behind lessons. This one reminded the world that commercial aviation is built on layers of protection. Modern aircraft are designed with redundant systems. Cabin crews train extensively for emergencies. Controllers rehearse rare scenarios throughout their careers. Pilots continuously practice handling unexpected events. When one layer fails, another stands ready. And sometimes, the greatest safety system is the human ability to stay calm under unimaginable pressure. Preparation, communication, discipline, and teamwork remain aviation's strongest defenses. Final narration. Some stories are remembered because of tragedy. Others are remembered because people refuse to give up. Flight Meridian 482 was never supposed to become history. It was meant to be just another routine journey across the Atlantic. Instead, it became a reminder that courage does not always wear a captain's uniform. Sometimes, it sits quietly in seat 14A, waiting for a moment it never wanted, a moment it never expected, a moment that changed hundreds of lives forever. Long after the aircraft returned to service, long after the headlines disappeared, every passenger remembered one sound above all others. Not the warning alarms, not the engines, not the touchdown, but the silence, just before hope returned. Because in aviation, as in life, the difference between disaster and survival is often measured not in technology, but in people. If this story leaves you with one lesson, let it be this: preparation matters, teamwork saves lives, and even in the darkest moments, calm decisions can overcome overwhelming odds. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this fictional aviation documentary, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more cinematic aviation stories inspired by the professionalism, resilience, and teamwork that make modern flight one of the safest forms of travel. Until next time, blue skies, safe flights, and thank you for flying with you.